By 1979, the Human Development Index of Nigeria, we were ranking, I think, 49. By 1999, we were 178, which we moved almost 100 and something, 20 something behind. So at the end of the day, when people talk about issues in governance, what we ought to be looking at, particularly for me, from 1999, is why is it that the reforms undertaken under President Obasanjo to institutionalize values and law, if you go through reform records, you will discover that we had, in fact, I've not seen any recent reform that was not started under Obasanjo, whether you are talking about ICPC, whether you are talking about EFCC, whether you are talking about tax reform, whether you are talking about even budget processes. So the issue is not about whether there are issues. Even in the United States, there is no country you don't have issues. But the point is that why this has remained disruptive is that it's usually personalized. The institutions don't come in. And if you look at what has happened between 1999 to date, it will seem as if the core civil service has been alienated. That is, it is no longer the bureaucracy that drives institutional values. So you just hear about ministers, you hear about directors and what have you. But most importantly, as in the aspects we also have to look at is the fact that the constitutional amendments we required to be able to deepen democracy have not taken effect.
All right.
Because why would we continue to have conflict between the Office of Attorney General and the EFCC? Just because if you look at Section 174 of the Constitution, it vests on the Attorney General and the Federal, the powers of prosecution. But again, the creation of EFCC, you will also see how EFCC have not been able to emerge as an institution that is accountable. So the altercation is that when now you have these institutions cross each other, there are no clear demarcations in terms of law to be able to interpret what ought to be.
All right, Dr. Denibo, how does this come to you, these fightings?
Yes, like my colleague said, you see, if you look at some countries like US, Britain, and the rest of it all, you find out they still have some measure of respect and rule of law. In a country where you don't have respect for rule of law and value, you expect there must be crisis every other place. The institutions like companies, like EFCC, like other organizations, if the head is shaky, if the head is not confident of itself, eventually it will affect the stream downline, and people will continue to do whatever they like. If you look at the EFCC, like you said, you look at the AGF and the presidency, you find out they are acting, independently. The AGF has no respect for the presidency. The AGF has no respect for EFCC. The same thing with ICPC. The same thing with even the ministries. And if we find out our Senate, look at the Senate and the House of Rep, you see that they have their own operational methods. They don't have any regard for our constitution. Because it is only when you have regulations and obey the regulations and then act towards that line stipulated that you can now say there will be sanity every other place. In Nigeria, for instance, I don't think there is anything that we are doing now that we say we are copying from the presidency because they are not actually in control of what they like. The professor said in Lagos, one doctor said, as you referred to, it is not that the country is kind of disorganized, but the thing is that there are no cohesion in our constitution. There are no cohesion in our rule of law. They have no, in fact, there is no respect anywhere. Again, the politicians are trying to guide their roots, and because of fear of somebody trying to erode his own authority in order to prevent him from getting what he wants, he will start to fight that person who wants to, push him around so that he won't get what he wants. And that is why when somebody is getting with power and he wants to get out of that power, he must try to invent and bring in somebody that can be very, very obedient to him and protect all he has stolen from the government. And because of that, he will start to fight some other person who wants to place in another person without whom he thinks can now x-ray him or bring him out and then say all he has looted. So that protection is what makes some of them to fight each other. Because let's take for instance what is happening now between the Magu and the AGF. There is now, things are now settling down because the director of EFCC is trying to see what the AGF has done, and the AGF has seen the danger along the line, and maybe he's piping down, and that's such type of thing. Like my colleague said, trying to analyze what happened years back. If you look at during the time of Opera and Ibiam, Nandaskiwe and Aboro, it is only in Yoruba land that you have that particular crisis, seriously. In the southern part of this country, that's the eastern region, Opera and Ibem have never had any crisis because they understand what in fact, that was when they started.
Are you saying the crisis is peculiar to ethnic?
It's not peculiar to ethnic, but this crisis is based on interest. It's not
peculiar to ethnic group.
It's not peculiar to any group. But the thing is, they understand they have value for each other and they have value for the people they are representing. Like in the eastern region, we have ADC, which was established by that is Agricultural Development Corporation. We have other organizations established. That was when we have the Presidential Hotel. We have some of these industries that employs our youths and some other people. But after this group of human beings, there have never been even revamping the ones, those that have been established by the past regime, that is the Opera and the rest of it, they find it very difficult. Right. And any person that happens to embark on a new project and he really finish that project, he knows pretty fine that he's not going to be completed. One, because if the other person comes in, he will not look at that. And because I have, like I said, it is personal interest mostly that is causing this part of breaches here and there.
Okay, Comrade Fidelis, a lot of things have been itemized, from personal interest or corruption fighting back to the need for constitutional amendment and the proper definition of power, like having this yes, we know we have checks and balances, but then we also need to understand separation of powers. Then we also had this issue of a lack of respect for rule of law, which was said by Dr. Denibo. Are there other things you see behind these infightings?
Isn't there, you see, I think part of what has happened is that we also not having a critical civic lot in terms of citizen participation in governance. If you look at the political process, how candidates emerge before they now assume public office, you will discover it starts from almost like a private endeavor, a narrow thing, up to the point that the person is elected. Then the person assumes office and begins to preside. But let me just make this point about even the allusion I made earlier and the reference Dr. Odenibo made. It was general. If you even step back a little bit, you will discover that under the colonial governments, the Austin of Lugard, when Lugard was recalled, McFarkinson didn't quite agree with almost all the policies of Lugard. There were issues they would usually refer to Britain. The biggest crisis that created up to date the gap in what used to be Eastern Nigeria was the Zika Professor Eyeta issue. So it's not about trial. But let me talk about the aspect you talked about, separation of power. There has been, for me, some misconception the way most people interpret separation of power. Yes, in the Constitution, there is an attempt to demarcate so that there is no over-concentration of power in any arm of government. But in the same separation, you also have what is called power sharing, because power sharing and separation of power is different. Power sharing is what brings about that the president will have to nominate those he wants to appoint ministers and send it for confirmation. If you have a total separation of power, that will not be. Power sharing is what brings about that the appropriation as presented by the president have to be approved by the National Assembly. Power sharing is what brings about the oversight function which we have. But let me also say, to re-emphasize the initial point I made about our not being able to deepen democracy to the extent that is accountable and in line with the spirit of the Constitution. If we had followed through the reforms embarked upon under Obasanjo through Yaradua, if you recall, under Yaradua, we also had an issue with the then Attorney General Andoka over the Halliburton scandal that even led to his being stripped of his son by I think justice, you know, NJC, you know. So the point I am making is that we would have had the best of governance values under Buhari, assuming we had deepened the institution. Because if you follow just the recent engagement between the Minister of State and Labour and the National Assembly, you will now see a president that tends to say, if you know your job, you do it. And you saw the position of Festus Kayomo, which is in line with the constitutional provision, because the role the National Assembly wanted to play in that project was something they would have done at the point of approving the program. It was at the point they were approving the budget they would have called from the ministry to know from point A to Z in terms of how they want to implement that special public work program. Then once the outline is done, the next stage will be now to oversight to find out what they had submitted to them is consistent with what they are doing. But you say a situation where I don't know what they were thinking, they just approved I think 53 billion. And now at the point where they invited the state minister, whose responsibility it is in the constitution as assigned, having been appointed by the president, they now want to be part of it. So you can now see how the president distancing himself, and even when the president of the Senate erroneously gave the impression that the program can be suspended, you now see they don't have such powers. That's the rule of law. You know, so the point isn't it that has happened is that we have people, there is nowhere, and that is why if you look at what happened in US about the whistleblower, was he not a staff of the president of US? But the man was protected by the law. He was acting pursuant to United States interests against the interests of the president. So, but what is lacking in our own is that first you have the patronage system. For instance, if you look at the removal of the APC chairman, I'm sure that if the guy had courage and have gone to court, the court would have pronounced otherwise, and it would have deepened the political party. People will usually treat things as family affair.
All right.
So at the end of the day, the judiciary in the separation of power have not been invited to interpret the constitution. So you will just discover that there are issues between Mago and
ESS.
And then there is issue in NDCC and what have you. And nobody will approach the court in terms of the law to say this is what ought to be.
Dr. Denibo.
Now, you see, what I actually believe is that there is Nigerians don't respect the rule of law guiding their particular institution. For instance, we talk about power sharing. If like AGF and the EFCC, if you look at certain things that happen in between them, you find that it borders on personal interest. It is not of national interest. Because if they start to unearth what has happened between two of them, you find out that that thing actually rests on personal interest and not for Nigerian interest. Then again, you see, if we come to conflicts in Nigeria, and we look at what is happening, you find out that there is specified constitutional measures for each position. The House of the Senate and the Rep, they have their own constitution. They have the nation's constitution. Then the presidency don't actually work with our own constitution, and the Senate don't also work with the constitution. And all this, everybody goes into the free field to do whatever he likes, but whether he does what he wants. Like I said earlier, all this is borders on personal interest. It is not the interest of the whole Nigerian people. Then again, the politicians don't have the value for Nigerian citizens. They protect their own, what they are doing, what they want to do. They protect their party. Okay, look at what is happening between Oshumole now and the former chairman of APC. They have, in fact, he is the person who actually gave him the position, the former APC. I don't know. But now, the Oshumole don't recognize him. Then Obaseki don't recognize Oshumole, and Oshumole and Obaseki. I think the quote is between them now is a part of ego, not at this point in time, not for personal interest. It is ego. They want to tell the person that I am the person who gave you the position you are managing. And since I gave you the position, you are not respecting me, you are not giving me the booty, because they must agree that every month you pay such sort of thing, which the politicians do. Because many politicians, they will take you to Shrine, you swear for them that you'll be giving them some amount of money. And then if you don't give that amount of money at the end of the term, they will start to fight you. These things actually borders on still on personal interest. So what I'm trying to say is that if you look at the United States, like it's rightly said, the personal method of the United States government is not the same with our own government. Because we don't give regard to anything. We don't give regard for human life, and we don't give regard to the constitution of the law, of the land.
All right, you're listening to Political Voices on 92.5 Enugu Stream FM, an ending fight among political appointees in Nigeria, the issues and concerns on governance. 0809888925 or 090200200925. Join the conversation. You can also join us on the social media platforms. We are live on Facebook, 925 Dream FM. The YouTube address is Dream TV Enugu. You should join us there as well. And the WhatsApp line is open, 090200200925. Hello, good morning.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome. What's your name, sir?
This is Barnabas calling from Chuka.
Go ahead, Barnabas.
Eddie, I must tell you, the cost of all this fight is because our leaders don't respect constitution. They don't have regard to our constitution. And another thing that causes this is personal interest. And when this thing is happening now, and our country will be disorganized. And I must tell them, the only thing to this is respect of the rule of law and do away with personal interest and involve with national interest.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barnabas. We'll keep it short and simple. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Welcome. What's your name, sir?
This is David Robona. I'm calling from Unending.
Welcome, David. Go ahead.
Thank you for this topic this morning. And I think the analysts there, they are doing justice to it. But however, I have to say something. I am laughing this topic. The reason is very simple. When the beginning of this dispensation is our president, all of us say the leader who is our president. And I have to talk about it. He himself say, when I was at London Barracks, but now he is not strong. We are talking about who is judge. As far as you are concerned, anybody that president could listen to, anybody that president can even say that can even subject president to sign anything. That is when we are now looking at Nigeria has started noticing the impact of Abakari, who has been our president. Nobody know. But this guy go out from the...
Abakar was never our president. The president is Muhammadu Buhari.
Okay, sorry, I have to tell you. Listen, the impact of the man. Nobody now respects anybody. Nobody respects even the president. Anywhere you are president of a particular place where you are. Nobody, we have never seen this kind of echelon before. A situation whereby every ministry, everybody are on, in fact, infighting. And this infighting will continue because there's nobody which will even pinpointedly say he's our president. The president will have the president that signs signature to the bills.
Thank you very much. Please keep it short and simple. Let's allow others. 0809